What about Baker Act?
So Baker
How do you
Act's-
like?
go
So
ahead.
we had a couple who bought like 20 grand worth of shit, like and you know, just had a great time, spent a lot of money. It was glorious, and then fucking non-approval on the girl, and so we had to refund everything back. You know, like everything. It was 20 grand, so it was a lot of money that was taken out of our pocket. But I think what happened with this individual was the person was Baker acted.
Right.
So how do you get your rights back when you're Baker acted?
So there,
Or should you even get your rights back?
yeah, no, you can, if you're Baker acted or Marchman acted. So Baker Act is when there's a mental health issue, you're a threat to yourself or others, and you get thrown into a mental health hospital. Then Marchman Act is if it's drugs or alcohol related. You're so intoxicated or impaired, law enforcement has the right to physically take you to the drunk tank, basically, or whatever. So there's two types of Baker Acts.
Has that happened to you, Luke?
No.
Marchman Act?
No? That's
Never.
good. Yeah.
Does that happen? That doesn't happen a lot up in
It happens a lot in Michigan.
Michigan.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. It's old. There's nothing to do with drink. It happens a lot around here, but Marchman Acts aren't as big a deal though, because it's usually just because the person's like drunk right now. So right, you take them in, you put them in the mental health hospital. In 24 hours, they let them go because they sober up. It's not really an underlying psychotic issue. You see a lot more Baker Acts, obviously. The Marchman Acts the cops do to get the homeless drunks off the street. They put them in the jail for 8 hours and they let them go because they sober up. But there's what's important is there's police action Baker Acts and there's court action Baker Acts. What I mean by that is if you're walking down the street talking to the Martians and you're like threatening people that walk by or whatever, law enforcement has a right to detain you right then and transport you to the mental health facility under a Baker Act.
Okay.
And they check you in. They're allowed to hold you there for 72 hours just based on the cop bringing you in. If before that 72 hours, they determine that you're no longer a threat to yourself or others and they just release you, there's no court action there. It doesn't show up on any database that you were Baker acted because there's no court case, there's no medical record or anything along those lines because you were released within the 72 hours. That type of Baker Act will not make you a prohibited person. It will not show up on a background check. You will be just fine. If you hit the 72-hour mark and they still believe you're a threat to yourself or others, the doctors will petition the court to sign a court order keeping you under that Baker Act past the 72 hours. Once there's court action, that is what goes on your background check, and that is what triggers the prohibited person section of the federal statute. So lots of people get Baker acted, but that doesn't mean that they're a prohibited person.
Yeah, but okay. Well, on the form it says, "Have you ever been adjudicated mentally defective?"
That's by a court.
That's by a court.
That's what I'm saying. The court action is where the adjudicated. I think it actually says by a court or whatever, but it's the adjudication by a court of competent jurisdiction or whatever the language is in there. So it's the court adjudication.
Omar,
The
will you
cop-
go grab a form?
Sure.
Yeah, the cop is not adjudicating you anything. He's just taking you off the street to protect you and everybody else. The doctors haven't adjudicated you or anything because they let you go within 72 hours because you were no longer a threat to yourself or others. It's only when there's a court order that forces you to stay there past that 72-hour hold against your will that the statute kicks in.
Okay. So, yeah. So, okay. Have you ever been adjudicated as a mental defective, or have you ever been committed to a mental institution? So my problem with that,
But both of those require court actions because you're only committed by a court.
it doesn't say that though.
But that's what the legal definition of committed is.
So
when you
here's
look at the federal statute, when it labels what a prohibited person is, and you go to the mental health section, it talks about the court action.
So I mean, it's not that I want to give guns to crazy people, but
Right.
but so the problem is when somebody looks at this question, they're like, well, I've been Baker acted.
Right.
Okay, and immediately if somebody says I've been Baker acted, the sale ends.
Right.
Like that's what the ATF teaches us. And if the customer by mistake puts yes on here,
Right.
as opposed to no because they don't know, then it's game over. You never buy a firearm again. I mean, it's
But I'm just telling you that
You're just telling
that's
that-
not what the law says.
Okay.
You could say it's a confusing question, I guess, and it probably is because most people don't understand what the difference is. But I'm telling you, if you've been scooped off the street by a cop, but you were released before the end of the 72 hours and there was no court action, you are not a prohibited person under the federal statute, and you can purchase a firearm.
So how about
So those people can legally mark no on that box because they haven't been adjudicated mentally defective or committed to a facility.